All right, so looks like we're diving into some pretty deep philosophical waters today.
Yeah, you could say that.
We've got a whole stack of Kant's here.
Oh, wow.
Critique of judgment, critique of practical reason, and
All three critiques, huh?
critique of pure reason.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Yeah, and I know this is no small feat, I know, but
Definitely a challenge.
we're not going to get bogged down in the academic jargon.
Right.
We're aiming for those aha moments, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
The ideas that really make you stop and think, like, whoa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And trust me, these critiques are full of those moments.
Oh, I believe it.
Kant, he really tackles those big questions.
Yeah.
How do we experience beauty? What are the limits of human knowledge? Can we be truly free?
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit, starting with something that might surprise you.
Okay.
Kant, the guy known for his strict moral philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Actually has some pretty interesting things to say about enjoyment. In his critique of judgment,
Okay.
he throws us this curveball.
Okay.
He says there's no such thing as an obligation to enjoy something.
That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds kind of obvious at first,
Yeah.
but it actually gets at like the heart of what makes aesthetic judgment so unique.
Right.
Think about it.
Yeah.
If someone tells you you have to enjoy this art,
Oh, yeah.
doesn't it kind of like instantly kill the joy?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
it's like someone saying this party is going to be so fun. You must have a good time.
Right. Exactly.
And suddenly the pressure's on. Any
Yeah.
genuine enjoyment just goes right out the window.
Poof, gone in.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what Kant is getting at here.
Okay.
He's highlighting this fact that aesthetic judgment is this like free play between our imagination and our understanding.
Huh?
It can't be like forced or dictated by rules.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
Yeah.
so when you find yourself like genuinely captivated by something,
Mhm.
a song, a view, a piece of art, that's this free play happening, right?
Okay.
It's your mind, like making connections, creating meaning, finding pleasure on its own terms.
Yeah.
Without anyone telling it what to do.
I love that. I love that way of putting it.
Yeah.
And this idea of free play kind of connects back to Kant's distinction between the beautiful and the sublime, which he also explores in the critique of judgment.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Same
if that's
Louis.
the beautiful, right.
Right, the beautiful things that are harmonious, balanced, pleasing to the senses.
Right, exactly.
Think of like a perfectly symmetrical flower,
Okay.
or like a stunning sunset,
Sure.
or a melody that just flows effortlessly.
Yeah, those
Really-
are perfect examples.
Yeah, and what makes the beautiful so captivating is that our appreciation of it is what Kant calls disinterested, right?
Right, disinterested.
Yeah.
Meaning,
We're not focused on what we can get from the object.
right. yeah,
Because
yeah.
its usefulness or its monetary value.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
drawn to its form, its inherent qualities.
Like it's like the difference between looking at a delicious cake
Okay.
and thinking, "Oh, I want to eat that,"
Right.
versus like admiring the artistry of the frosting.
Yeah, yeah.
The way the light plays off the glaze.
Exactly.
There's a different kind of appreciation.
The different kind of appreciation, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you have the sublime, which is like a whole other category of experience.
Right.
It's about encountering something that kind of overwhelms us,
Yeah.
challenges our comprehension, even inspires like a touch of fear or awe.
Yeah, so think of like standing at the edge of a vast canyon,
Okay.
or gazing up at a starry night sky,
Mhm.
or listening to a powerful thunderstorm, right?
Right?
It's this feeling of being humbled,
Yeah.
of confronting something much greater than ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And here's where Kant's view of the sublime gets really interesting. He argues that it's not just about the object itself, it's about how our minds react to it.
Okay.
So, we recognize its power, its vastness, and yet,
We find like a strange sense of pleasure in that in that very confrontation.
exactly. Yeah, it's like this thrilling mix of fear and awe.
Right.
Like we're pushing ourselves to the very limits of our understanding.
Yeah.
But there's a joy in that too.
It's kind of like almost like
Yeah.
our reason steps in and reminds us that we are in a way superior to the forces that threaten to overwhelm us.
Exactly.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I follow that.
Okay.
If a giant meteor is hurtling toward Earth, I'm pretty sure my puny human reason isn't going to stop it.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
You're not gonna stop the meteor with pure thought.
Right.
But your reason can grasp the concept of its vastness, its power.
Okay.
right? And that very act of comprehension, even in the face of something so overwhelming, speaks to the incredible capacity of the human mind.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that works. It's like we're finding strength and even a kind of exhilaration in our ability to confront something that could potentially crush us.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, and it highlights a really crucial aspect of Kant's philosophy.
What's that?
It's not about passively observing the world, right?
Yeah.
It's about the active role our minds play in shaping how we experience reality.
Exactly.
How we find meaning, even in the face of the vast and the unknown.
That's really at the core of it, yeah.
Okay, so we've explored beauty and the sublime.
Right.
But now let's dive into something that might seem a bit drier at first.
Okay.
But trust me, it has huge implications.
All right, I'm intrigued.
We're talking about the fact of reason.
Ah, the fact of reason.
Yeah.
This comes from the critique of practical reason.
Yes.
And it's one of Kant's most controversial ideas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's arguing that the moral law isn't something we, derive from desires or social norms or even divine commands. It's a fundamental fact that we know through reason alone.
So it's like a self-evident truth.
Exactly.
Kind of like recognizing that 2 + 2 = 4.
Yes, very much like that.
Yeah.
You just get it intuitively.
Yeah.
Without needing any external proof.
Yeah. Okay.
But this is where things get a bit tricky.
Right.
Because Kant is implying that there are universal moral principles that hold true regardless of culture or personal beliefs.
Yeah.
And if it's a fact, like a mathematical truth, shouldn't everyone agree on what this moral law actually is?
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So that's where things get a bit complex.
I can already see where this is going to lead to some interesting debates.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we get into that, I'm curious about how this idea of a fact of reason squares with Kant's emphasis on freedom.
Right.
Isn't there a risk that if morality is based on some fixed universal law, that it leaves no room for individual choice?
That's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of Kant's idea of freedom.
Okay.
He would say that true freedom isn't just about doing whatever we want.
Right.
It's about acting in accordance with this moral law, which we discover through reason.
So in a way, by choosing to act morally, we're actually choosing to be truly free.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's like aligning ourselves with a higher principle that transcends our individual whims and desires.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
this connects back to his view that acting from duty can feel like what he calls a yoke at times.
Yeah, a yoke.
But it's a yoke imposed by our own reason,
exactly,
not some external force.
Not something outside of us.
Right. I can see how that could be both empowering and challenging. It's like recognizing that we have the capacity to make choices that are guided by something larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
But it also requires a lot of introspection and self-discipline.
Absolutely.
And this is where Kant's ideas start to get really practical, because he doesn't just leave us with this abstract notion of a moral law, right? He gives us like a tool for figuring out what it looks like in our daily lives.
That's a great point. Yeah.
You're talking about the categorical imperative, right?
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the principle that says
it's basically like a test of consistency.
Act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically like a test of consistency and rationality.
Okay.
It's asking us to imagine a world where everyone acts on the same principle that we're considering.
If that world would be chaotic or self-contradictory, then our principle fails the test.
So let's play this out with a real life scenario.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
So let's say I'm thinking about making a promise I know I can't keep.
Okay.
Kant would say, imagine a world where everyone breaks their promises whenever it's convenient.
Right. What would that world look like?
Yeah, and it wouldn't be pretty, right?
No, it would not.
Trust would be impossible.
Right.
Agreements would be meaningless.
Exactly.
Society would essentially collapse.
It would fall apart.
So my my seemingly small act of breaking a promise, when universalized, right, has massive negative consequences.
Exactly.
So it fails the categorical imperative test.
It does, yeah.
And therefore, it's morally wrong.
Precisely.
Yeah, okay.
So the categorical imperative forces us to think beyond, like, our immediate desires and to consider the bigger picture.
Right.
It's like Kant is saying, don't just act on impulse. Like, use your reason to figure out what principles could govern a just and rational world.
Yeah, that's a pretty high bar.
It is.
But it also seems empowering.
It is empowering, yeah.
Like we have the ability to figure out right and wrong for ourselves.
Yeah.
Not just blindly follow rules or traditions.
That's at the core of Kantian ethics.
Yeah.
It's about autonomy.
Okay.
About using our own reason to determine what's right.
Okay.
And this connects back to his idea of freedom.
Yeah.
Remember, for Kant, freedom isn't just doing whatever I want.
Right.
It's about acting in accordance with this moral law.
Right. So in a sense, by choosing to act morally, we're choosing to be truly free.
Exactly. It's freedom from the tyranny of our desires and impulses.
Yeah.
And aligning ourselves with a higher principle that we as rational beings can recognize as valid.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but my brain is already doing some heavy lifting here.
Mine too, yeah.
Yeah, this is challenging stuff.
It is, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what makes Kant so fascinating.
Right.
He pushes us to think so deeply about these fundamental questions.
Yeah.
You know, how we experience the world.
Right.
How we make choices. What it means to be truly free.
Well said. Well said. Now, before we go any further down this rabbit hole, let's take a step back and explore another fascinating aspect of Kant's thinking.
All right.
The limits of reason.
Okay.
This is where things get really mind-bending.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, so this is where the critique of pure reason really comes into play.
Right.
And it's where Kant throws us another curveball.
Okay.
He argues that we can only truly know the world of appearances, not the things in themselves that lie beyond our senses.
Okay, now you're really messing with my head here.
Yeah.
Are you saying that we're basically trapped in some kind of mental illusion that we can never access, like true reality?
It's not quite that simple. Kant's point is that our minds aren't just passive receptacles for information.
Okay.
Right? They actively structure our experience, imposing categories like space and time onto the raw data of sensations.
So it's like we're wearing these mental glasses.
Exactly.
That filter and organize how we see the world.
Yeah.
And because we can't take those glasses off,
we
can never know what reality is truly like in itself.
Right.
We can only know how it appears to us, filtered through the lens of our human perception.
It's like trying to imagine a color you've never seen before.
Right.
You just can't do it.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, your mind is limited by the colors you already know.
Right, right.
And this idea of the limits of reason, it can be both humbling and liberating.
Humbling, because it means we're not all-knowing gods.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
We're finite beings with finite minds. But it's also liberating, because it means we're not just like puppets of some predetermined fate.
Wait, hold on. How does that follow?
Well, because if we can't know the things in themselves, the ultimate reality beyond appearances, then we can't know if that reality is deterministic or not.
Oh, okay.
So we can't rule out the possibility of free will.
So the door is left open to other ways of knowing, other ways of experiencing reality.
Yeah, and this is where Kant's practical philosophy, his ethics, comes in.
Okay. He
argues that while we can't prove freedom through pure reason, we can experience it directly through our moral choices.
So it's like saying, I don't need a scientific experiment to tell me I'm free.
Right.
I feel it when I make a difficult moral decision, when I choose to do what's right, even when it's hard.
Yeah, that's a very insightful way to connect it to our lived experience. Yeah, and this brings us to, I think, one of the most mind-blowing aspects of Kant's thought.
Okay.
Synthetic a priori judgments.
These statements that go beyond mere definitions,
yes,
but are still knowable independent of experience.
That's it.
Like everything that happens has a cause.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a classic example.
Yeah.
And what makes this concept so revolutionary is that Kant applies this same logic to morality.
Okay.
He argues that maybe our sense of right and wrong isn't just cultural programming or personal preference, but a fundamental truth woven into the very fabric of our minds. Just like our understanding of cause and effect.
Okay. Now that is a truly mind-blowing idea.
It is. It's a big one.
Yeah. It's like saying we're all born with this innate moral compass, and it's up to us to use our reason to figure out how to read it correctly.
That's a fantastic way to capture the essence of Kant's thought.
Yeah.
It's a philosophy that challenges us to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
To be responsible for our choices. And to strive to live in accordance with a universal moral law that we, as rational beings, have the capacity to discover.
All right, I think we've covered some seriously heavy ground here.
We have, yeah.
But before we get too overwhelmed, let's take a quick break to process all of this.
That's a good idea. I think we could all use a moment to digest.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, these are concepts that require some real mental digestion.
For sure.
And when we come back, we can delve even deeper into how Kant's ideas can help us understand ourselves and the world around us.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so we've been exploring some pretty mind-bending concepts from Kant.
Yeah, we have.
The beautiful and the sublime, the fact of reason,
right?
The limits of our knowledge.
Yeah.
But before we spiral too far into the abstract,
yeah.
I'm wondering how all this connects back to our everyday lives.
That's a great question, and it's something that Kant was deeply concerned with. His whole project was about understanding the nature of reason,
right,
and how it shapes our experience of the world,
right,
including our moral choices.
Right, and one of the most fascinating and challenging aspects of his moral philosophy is this idea of synthetic a priori judgments.
Right.
We touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting because it has huge implications.
It does.
For how we understand ourselves and our place in the world.
I agree. Yeah, it's a concept that really forces us to rethink some basic assumptions about how we acquire knowledge and make moral decisions.
Remember, Kant is grappling with this puzzle.
Yeah.
How can we have knowledge that goes beyond mere definitions?
Right.
Yet is still knowable, independent of experience.
Independent of experience, yeah.
So it's not just about learning facts from the world around us.
No.
It's about these fundamental principles that seem woven into the fabric of our minds.
Right, exactly.
The way we make sense of reality.
Yeah.
And the mind-blowing part is that Kant argues that these synthetic a priori judgments aren't limited to things like math and logic.
Right.
He thinks the moral law itself is a synthetic a priori judgment.
Exactly. Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
It means that morality isn't like arbitrary.
Right.
It's not just a matter of, opinion or social convention.
Right, yeah.
It's grounded in the very structure of our reason, in the way our minds are designed to make sense of the world.
Okay, I'm following you so far.
Okay.
But I think I need a bit more help understanding how this works in practice.
Sure.
How do we actually discover these synthetic a priori principles?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Especially when it comes to morality.
Well, remember that tool we talked about earlier, the categorical imperative.
Right.
It's not just like a philosophical concept.
Yeah.
It's a practical guide for figuring out what the moral law looks like in action.
Right. It's that test of universality.
Exactly.
Before you act, imagine everyone else acting on the same principle.
Right.
Would that world be one you'd want to live in?
Precisely. And here's where things get really powerful.
Okay.
Kant argues that when we apply the categorical imperative to moral questions, we arrive at certain universal principles that hold true regardless of, our personal desires, cultural background, or even the specific circumstances we find ourselves in.
So give us an example, something that really brings this home for the listener.
Okay, let's consider the principle of treating others with respect. Okay, so imagine a world where everyone just disregards the dignity of others whenever it's convenient.
Right.
Could you trust anyone in that world?
Definitely not.
Would you feel safe?
No.
Would it even be possible to build meaningful relationships?
I don't think so.
No, it would be a world of constant suspicion, fear, and exploitation.
Right.
Nobody would feel secure or valued.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
Right. And that's how Kant arrives at this moral principle of treating others with respect.
Okay.
Not through like religious teachings or social norms or even like empathy, but through pure logic.
Right.
And the application of the categorical imperative.
Yeah.
It's a principle that arises from our ability to reason universally and to imagine a world where everyone acts on the same principle.
That's really making me think.
Yeah.
It suggests that maybe there's a deeper rationality to morality than we often realize.
I think so, yeah.
It's not just about feelings or gut instincts. No. It's about principles that can be tested and validated through reason.
That's a great insight, and it leads to this profound idea that we're not just like creatures of instinct and desire.
Right.
We're rational beings capable of grasping and acting on moral principles.
Yeah.
That transcend our individual circumstances.
It's like saying we all have this innate capacity for moral reasoning. This inner compass.
Yeah.
That can guide us towards a more just and ethical world.
Exactly. And this connects back to Kant's idea of freedom.
Right.
Remember, for him, true freedom isn't about doing whatever we want.
Right.
It's about aligning our will with the moral law that we discover through reason.
So in a sense, by choosing to act morally, we're actually choosing to be more fully human.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it leads to another fascinating aspect of Kant's thought.
Okay.
His distinction between the realm of nature and the realm of freedom.
Okay, now you're really piquing my curiosity.
Okay.
What's the difference between these two realms?
So Kant argues that the realm of nature is the world of cause and effect.
Okay.
The world of like physical laws and deterministic processes.
Right.
It's the world that science explores.
Right.
And seeks to understand.
So everything from the movement of planets to the workings of our bodies falls under the realm of nature.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
But Kant also recognizes that there's another realm.
Okay.
The realm of freedom, which is the domain of human reason and moral choice.
Okay.
It's the realm where we can like step back from our immediate desires and impulses and make decisions based on principles that we recognize as valid.
So it's like saying that even though we're physical beings subject to the laws of nature,
right?
We also have this capacity for rational thought and moral action that allows us to transcend those laws in a certain sense.
That's a great way to capture the tension that Kant's wrestling with.
Yeah.
He's not denying the power of nature,
right,
or the influence of our biology, but he's also saying that we're not simply puppets of those forces.
Right.
We have the capacity to step back.
Yeah.
To deliberate.
Right.
And to choose a different path based on our understanding of what's right.
And that ability to choose to act freely is what makes us moral beings in Kant's view.
Precisely. And it's also what gives our lives meaning and purpose.
Okay.
Because for Kant, the highest good isn't just about, pleasure or happiness. It's about living a life that's worthy of our rational nature, a life guided by moral principles.
Yeah.
That we recognize as valid.
That's a pretty inspiring vision of what it means to be human.
I think so.
But I have to admit, it also feels a bit daunting.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
It's like we're being called to live up to this ideal of rational moral agents. Right. And that's a lot of pressure.
It is demanding. Yeah, Kant's philosophy is definitely demanding. But it's also, I think, incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
Because it's ultimately a call to action, a challenge to use our reason to create a better world, both for ourselves and for others.
So we've been on quite the Kantian journey, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Exploring everything from the beautiful and the sublime to the very nature of knowledge and morality.
Right.
I feel like we've climbed a philosophical mountain and are now gazing out at this vast, awe-inspiring landscape.
Our fitting analogy, given Kant's love for the sublime.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And like any good mountain climb, you know, this journey has required effort.
For sure.
But it's also offered some incredible vistas along the way.
Definitely.
Definitely. And speaking of vistas,
okay,
I'm curious to explore this view from the top a bit further.
Okay.
We've talked about how Kant sees the moral law as this product of reason, as something we discover within ourselves, rather than receiving it from external sources.
Right.
But I'm wondering how this squares with the fact that different cultures and societies seem to have different moral codes.
That's a good question.
If morality is really based on these universal principles of reason, shouldn't we see more agreement across cultures?
That's a really insightful question.
Yeah.
And it highlights one of the key challenges to Kant's moral philosophy.
Right.
He would argue that while specific moral rules might vary across cultures, the underlying principles of morality are universal and accessible to all rational beings.
Okay, so it's like saying that different cultures might have different ways of expressing those principles.
Exactly.
But the core values are still the same.
Yeah, think about it this way.
Okay.
Different cultures might have like different customs around hospitality, for example.
Okay.
But the underlying principle of treating guests with kindness and respect is something that seems to resonate across cultures.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like different languages having different words for love, but the underlying emotion is still recognizable.
That's a great analogy.
Yep.
Yeah. And it helps us understand how Kant can reconcile this idea of universal moral principles with the diversity of cultural norms. He's not saying that every culture gets everything right.
Right.
But he's arguing that there's this common ground of rationality.
Okay.
That we can appeal to when trying to resolve moral disagreements.
So even though Kant acknowledges that our reason is limited, that we can only know the world of appearances, he's still saying that there's this realm of moral truth.
Exactly.
That we can access through careful reasoning and the application of the categorical imperative.
Precisely. And this is where I think Kant's philosophy can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
Even in the face of uncertainty and complexity, it's saying that we're not just adrift in this sea of conflicting opinions and values. We have the capacity to figure things out for ourselves. Reason our way towards a more just and ethical world.
Okay, I'm really starting to appreciate the power and the relevance of Kant's ideas.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, it's also a bit intimidating.
It can be.
He sets such a high bar for moral reasoning.
He does. Yeah. Kant's philosophy is definitely demanding.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
Because it's ultimately a call to action.
Right.
A challenge to use our reason to create a better world, both for ourselves and for others.
That's a great point, and it makes me wonder how Kant's ideas can be applied, not just to individual decision making, but also to larger social and political issues.
Yeah.
Does his philosophy have anything to say about how we should structure our societies or govern ourselves?
Excellent. Yeah, and Kant's political philosophy is deeply rooted in his moral philosophy.
Okay.
He believed that the same principles of reason and autonomy that guide our individual choices should also inform the way we govern ourselves.
Okay.
He was a strong advocate for individual rights, freedom of expression, and the rule of law.
So he wouldn't be a fan of authoritarian regimes or systems that suppress individual liberty?
Definitely not.
All right.
Kant believed that true freedom requires the ability to make choices based on reason.
Right.
And that includes the freedom to participate in political decision making.
Right.
And to hold our leaders accountable.
That's really interesting. It suggests that Kant's philosophy can be a powerful tool for defending democracy and promoting social justice.
Yeah, and his ideas have been incredibly influential in the development of modern political thought.
Okay.
His emphasis on individual rights and human dignity has shaped everything from human rights declarations to international law.
Okay, so Kant's not just some dusty old philosopher whose ideas are locked away in academic libraries. He's actually speaking directly to some of the most pressing issues of our time.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes studying Kant so rewarding.
Yeah.
It's not just like an intellectual exercise.
Right.
It's an engagement with ideas that have shaped the world we live in and continue to offer insights for how we can create a more just and ethical future.
Well, I think we've climbed to the summit of our Kantian mountain.
We have.
And it's been an incredible journey.
It has.
But before we descend back into the valley of everyday life.
Okay.
I wanna leave our listener with one final thought.
Right.
We've talked about how Kant saw reason as the key to moral progress, both for individuals and for societies.
Right.
But he also recognized that reason is a fragile thing.
It is.
It can be easily corrupted by self-interest, prejudice, and fear.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that Kant's philosophy isn't just about, thinking the right thoughts.
Right.
It's about like cultivating the right habits of mind.
Yeah.
About being vigilant against the forces that can distort our reasoning and lead us astray.
So it's not enough to just read Kant and understand his ideas. We also have to put those ideas into practice to challenge our own biases and to be courageous enough to stand up for what we believe in.
Exactly.
Even when it's difficult.
Beautifully put. And I think that's a fitting note to end on because ultimately Kant's philosophy is a call to action, an invitation to use our reason to create a world that's worthy of our humanity.
Well said. Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of Immanuel Kant.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.